and welcome to Finding Games, the podcast where we talk to people who work in the tabletop games industry and find out how they got there. I'm Sophie from Needy Cat Games, and this podcast is supported by our wonderful Patreons. The Needy Cat Games Patreon gives access to the Finding Games podcast as soon as it's edited, as well as providing a whole host of game design tips and general tips for working in the industry. Our guests today are Mike and Grace, who are avid game designers as well as running the Tabletop Mentorship Program. Let's hear what they have to say. How's your move?
Oh, it's been chaotic. We traveled from Texas all the way up to Ohio over 3 days. I was releasing a music project at the same time, so we kept stopping at like hotels to squeeze in like radio broadcasts and different things, uploading files, and then we got here and had to get completely set up for a job at a board game cafe and get the mentorship started, and all of that kind of simultaneously has been a bit of delightful chaos.
That's a lot to do.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
No, I don't envy you at all with that. That sounds like a huge task. And then you've also agreed to come on the podcast on top.
This is like a delightful break. Yeah.
Is this a nice break from all the chaos you've been going through?
Right, exactly. It's nice to talk to a person.
Oh, I know. Especially in these days, it's just nice to have any kind of social contact, isn't it, at the moment? So I empathise with that.
Right.
So anyway, how are you? How are things going at your end in terms of what you've been doing?
Yeah, I mean, this mentorship session has gone fantastically. It is our most mentorships yet in one session. We've been doing this for just over a year, and this is our fifth session. So we do 3-month sessions right throughout the year. This is our fifth one, and we have 84 mentorship pairings, which is super exciting. The first time we did it, we had just around like 35-ish. So this is quite an upgrade.
Is this more than double? I mean, I'm not great at maths, but that's
yeah, definitely.
That's impressive, and that's happened over just over a year. Then you've more than doubled your membership, your interaction with what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, last session was the big jump. We've had consistently like around mid-30s mentorships for the first 3 sessions, and then the fourth session, something happened. It
was a pandemic.
It was a pandemic,
That's
right?
What happened.
That's true.
And also we had some kind of more high-profile people talk about it, and so it had a big uptick in interest and kind of exploded, and we're thrilled to see that energy carry forward.
And how's the response been from people who've gone through the program?
It's been great. We do exit surveys at the end of every session, and so we're always trying to improve it. And so in the beginning, there was like the first session was all me. It was a lot of work, and it was I made some mistakes here and there, but it got great constructive criticism from people, and then brought Grace on board for the second session and beyond. And has just crushed it, has improved it so much and streamlined it. So our last session was our best feedback ever. It was the most positive feedback ever. We changed something really big last time, and it seemed to have paid off in spades. So we're really happy about that.
That's amazing. Well, I know that James took part in a mentorship scheme, and he was really enjoying being a mentor. So I can't imagine that it's anything but positive for both sides of people who are going through that. So that's great.
Yeah, it's always exciting when because the mentorships is so personal, you don't always hear how they're going in detail. You'll just get top level, oh, it's going good, or we've had 5 meetings or whatever. But it's nice when we get personal connections with people who are like, hey, the project I worked on got signed. There was a person last session who launched a Kickstarter that they weren't planning on launching during their mentorship, and it successfully funded, and we got to kind of watch those sort of things happen, and that's always really exciting and validating. It's nice to see when it's working.
That's amazing. Right, so let's go back to before it all began. So what was the thing that got you both into tabletop games in the first place?
I mean, I've always been playing games since I was a kid, with my family, the classics, the Risks, the Monopolies, the Sorries, the Troubles.
Yeah, same. We were a Scrabble family. We would fight hard for those letters.
I was in a Trivial Pursuit family, which was a weird Yeah, I hated that game so much.
They're so divisive, right? The games that you grew up with, you either love them or you hate them, but either way, you've played them like 1,000 times.
Absolutely. So what was the next step from like playing those sort of family board games to then getting more into like, I suppose the term is like hobby board games these days, like the sort of the more specialist games, although I think that's becoming less and less of a thing now,
the
isn't it?
accessibility on it all around seems to be bigger. But like most people, Catan was kind of my gateway game, so I had a friend that taught me how to play that, and then the group of us got really into Catan specifically at first. We had like this beautiful ritual where there are 3 of us who would play together, and we would put on the Lord of the Rings soundtrack, and if May It Be ever came on, you had to stop playing and hold hands and have a moment of reverence. It was beautiful.
That sounds amazing.
Right?
I love it.
I love any kind of like ritualized moments like that, or we have like a playlist for all of our favorite games so that there's always like additional mood enhancements and stuff. But so from there, I just continued to discover other games. We found a board game meetup, Mike and I, when we were living in North Carolina, where we would go and play with people. And that was the first time I met somebody who was designing their own games. Our friend Will had this like awesome, gigantic table hog of like a Hunger Games-esque survival game.
Yeah, with like fully painted miniatures, magnets in the figures.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Yeah, it was so robust. And again, it was the first time I had seen anybody doing their own thing like that. And so then Mike started getting really into designing games, and I got pulled into some of that energy because we like to work on creative projects together, which is the exact same way I got pulled into the mentorship as well. Like, he did the first session by himself, but like I was there watching and like commenting the whole time. And then so when he went to do it again, he was like, all right, you have to do this with me now.
But that's always, I find that's often the way when you get like really strong creative bonds and partnerships, is that the excitement and the passion is really infectious, right? And that's one of the ways that you kind of push one another to do more and more and more and get better and better and better, is because you get kind of inspired by the other person.
Oh, absolutely. It's so nice to have someone to bounce off of too, because like for my personality, I'm the kind of person who will stop when I think something is good enough. And I really need someone to push past there. So we've had, games that we've worked on designing together where I'm like, all right, I'm done. This is perfect. And then Mike is like, all right, I'm going to spend the next year making this better, and then we can work on it again. And it's so much better for that process. So it's nice to be able to bring the parts out of another person that you don't have.
Well, and also I think as well, for me at least personally, because obviously James and I make up Needy Cat Games, the way that we do is whenever you get fatigued on a project, you have the space to put it down because the other person can always pick it up. So having that sort of space gives you space to kind of relearn why you love a project, or rediscover something else that's going to inspire you to do more.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Take us back to when you were first starting to do your own thing within the industry. What were you doing? What was the, were you doing a completely different job, or did you start straight off the bat in the industry? What were your first steps like?
So that's a great question. It's kind of a weird answer. I'm sure everyone has a weird answer for this question. But so we were living in North Carolina, and we had decided before we were going to move out, we were going to hike the Appalachian Trail here in the States. So from Georgia to Maine, it's about 2,200 miles. And yeah, exactly. It's this big kind of trip that everybody does, or not everybody. No. Nobody does.
It's popular among people who want to do long hikes and live in the woods for half a year.
Yeah. So anyway, we did that for 6 months. We lived in the woods. We hiked. We brought some games with us, which was really fun to play with other people and introduce them to. And at the end of it, when we got back and we settled into our new place, we had I toyed around with making the idea for making a game, and we were like, well, what could we make it out of, kind of like write what kind of thing. And since we had just done doing the trail, we were like, well, let's just make a game out of the Appalachian Trail, And it was we spent, days and days and days coming up with rules and doing all the maps, and like basically all your, first time mistakes, we did all of them, except for hiring an artist. We didn't do that. But before we ever played the game, we did all the rules. Like, this is exactly how it's going to go, and put it on the table and started to play. And within the first minute, realized that it would take longer to finish this game than to finish the actual Appalachian Trail. It just was not going to work. So,
but part of the experience of doing those mistakes, though, are the things that inform you improving and getting better, aren't they? So, it's great to have that first experience, even if it's kind of like not a great experience in the moment.
Oh, absolutely. I was so intrigued as to why it didn't work. Like we had planned it out perfectly in our minds. When we started playing, it was awful. I was like, what the heck happened? And that sort of started me on my like Facebook group game design journey of just like seeing if other people have come across similar problems, like what do people do when they design games, and that was my entry into that whole world, and I just was so curious about how it all worked.
So did you move straight from it being like a thing you did because you decided you just wanted to do it into working sort of full time in the industry, or was it more of a doing it part time alongside other work roles? How did you make that step from it being a thing that you did on the side to being like your whole focus?
We slid down a long slide that we didn't mean to go down, I think. We're both passion project people, so anytime our imagination is captured by something, that's where we put all of our time, whether it's spare time or full time. And so at the beginning, like Mike was doing a lot of design work and demoing and playtesting all the time, and I was kind of slower to slide into some of that. We did co-designing together for a while, and then I started designing my own projects on my own and had my first game published this summer, Celestial Stories from Dice and Ink, so that was exciting. And then we have just very recently, I think, slid all the way to the bottom of the slide, where we moved across the country to be assistant managers for this board game cafe. We have designs and dreams of opening a bed and breakfast that is centered around board games. So somewhere along the way, without us really realizing it, it became a lot of the plan. And so it wasn't, at least for me, there were no designs of like, I'm going to work my way up the ranks and become a thriving member of the board game industry. It was just like, I really like making things. And then it was like, I really like community organizing and helping people. And then the mentorship, we want to make it better every time. So that takes more work and attention and time. And we now have like a really ambitious session. So now it's like, okay, in the morning, we'll take care of mentorship stuff, and then we'll eat, and then we'll go to the board game cafe, and then we'll come home and do more mentorship stuff, and then maybe sleep.
Because you do a lot of different things, right?
Yes, that is a good summation of us as people, and just in general. We do a lot of things.
Yeah, I don't know, Sophie, if you've had this moment where the other day Grace, we were working on mentorship stuff, and Grace turned to me and just was like, Mike, I don't know if you realize, and then just started listing like my credits or things that I'd done in the industry. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've done all that? Are you kidding me?
Is that me?
Yeah, you still have that, at least me, I still have that feeling of just when I started, where I'm like, I can't wait to make it, And Grace is just like, no, Mike, I'm pretty sure you've surpassed what you thought was possible,
Yeah, absolutely. And it sort of takes you by surprise, doesn't it? Because those thoughts of like, if I just do X, Y, and Z, then I'll be successful. Right. And all that happens is the second you achieve one of those things, your brain reframes that as, oh, no, not that thing, this thing, then you'll have made it. So when you stop and take stock of everything that you've already done, it becomes quite shocking, really, at least for us. I've done exactly the same thing with we run the tabletop industry group. We maintain some social media that's gone down a hill a little bit over the last few months because of all the challenges, but we maintain a Twitter account for that. We've also got Needy Cat Games. We're designing 6 games concurrently, not all at the same time, but like 3 of them are in testing periods while we're doing 3 others, and you suddenly realize all the stuff you've achieved over the last few years, and you're like, oh my word, if you told me 3, 4, 5 years ago that this is where I'd be like, well, I've made it. But I still have that little voice in the back of my head going, no, because you're you're not massively famous. So, you know, even though 5 people in the whole industry are like household names that everyone knows, you know, and that's such an unreasonable expectation. My brain sort of tells me that. So I keep getting surprised by how much I've done.
Yeah, it's weird to set those barometers where success is so individual and personal too. And so if you're like, again, this industry is not necessarily like a super profitable industry for a lot of the people who are creating in it. And so as far as what your traditional benchmarks for success are, you know, it's easy to think like, oh, well, I haven't made it until like I can sustain myself financially on the creative work that I'm doing. And that's not a reality for a lot of people here. So, yeah, and for us either, you know, but it's interesting to be able to, look back at those other things and say, oh, but I did so much more than I was expecting to, or I did accomplish the goals I set for myself, or that if you had told me 3 years ago I would have done any of this, I would have been like, you can make board games? I'm like, oh, well, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's a thing you can do. How weird. I think it's really interesting as well because it's a weird default, and it's something I've caught myself in, and it's only something I've become self-aware of in the last few, like I would say even in the last 6 months, that it's a weird assumption within our culture and our society that it's not considered that you've made it until you've been able to monetize it. Like, you can't just make things for fun. But until my name's on the box and it's gone through Kickstarter and it's getting sold in shops, then I haven't really made a game, right? But that's such a weird way to approach something. Like, you can't just be like, I made this awesome thing and I loved making it and I loved the process of doing it. It's like the validation of monetizing something is not the only like benchmark for how successful someone's been. And it's such a weird thing that, like, as a society, that's our default of like, well, that's the first thing you do. The moment you enjoy anything, you sell it.
Oh, absolutely. See, my background before this is as an independent musician, and it's the same sort of thing where, you know, I'm releasing music that I've written, and I've made all these albums and recorded them in my house and with my friends, and I've toured the country. And then, you have to be like, well, why is there so much pressure to turn this into a traditional job or expect this to yield paychecks, or, you know, does that take away the fun of it? And I love to be able to just give away the things that I've made, because you do have to stop and define success for yourself, right? So for me, I like, exactly.
Absolutely.
So is it that you get a thrill out of making the thing in the first place? For me, I really enjoy the moment of connection where someone has felt something as a result of work that I've done. So whether it's a game that I've made or a song that I've written or the mentorship, you know, to know that somebody has had an experience that has moved them in some way, that's what I judge as successful. And so it's really nice to be able to look at those moments and say, oh, yes, I did affect these people and I did have these moments of connection, and so many more than you'll ever know, especially with the internet. You throw these seeds out into the world, and you throw a print and play up on the internet, and you don't know who's printed and or played. But there's somebody out there who has and has these moments of joy or connection, and you're partially responsible for them. And that's such a wonderful thing. And it's so hard to shift the conversation on it to even in your own head, I think, at least for me, a lot of the time, to think, yes, I am in this industry and I am a part of it and I am successful at it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really beautiful way of describing it, actually, because what you're trying to do is create joy and connection with people, and that's a far healthier way to try and measure success, I think. And it's something that I've been trying to really push on myself as well, like rather than worrying about, is this game going to be the next big thing, going, am I enjoying making it? And am I enjoying the process of playing the game myself? Like, if I don't enjoy making it, even if loads of other people enjoy playing it, why am I making it? Because if it's just making me unhappy, surely that's not a healthy thing to be doing. So it's really great to see how you've kind of redefined your measures for success, opposed to falling into that trap of like feeling like you have to monetize everything. Because I think you're right, like, and it's really interesting to hear that you are a musician as well, because I think creative people tend to be creative in lots of different ways. And I think everyone has the potential to be creative, and I think everyone does have something in them that they can make creative. I think they are very much skills rather than like natural talents. But the need to feel like you have to do that in every aspect of your life, that you can't have hobbies. If you spend a lot of time on your hobby, then why aren't you going to craft fairs and selling your art? Or why aren't you, why don't you have a YouTube channel for your music? Or, you've got to still somehow make it about money, I think is a really easy trap for us all to fall into. So it's really inspiring to hear that you talk about that in a different way.
And it's one of the things we try and do with the mentorship too, is like, the word industry comes up a lot and I hate it. I'm like sitting here regretting that I said industry, but I said it. So, but I really like the word community, and I like that the mentorship program is open to people who are just interested in making things, and you do get to define your own goals. So it's not all people who are trying to make a career of it or who are trying to be published. Sometimes it's people who are just like, I had this cool idea and I don't really know how to turn it into a physical thing, and I would just love somebody to help me along that journey, and that is just as valid as any other project, and that's so central to the way we kind of approach this. And as we continue to grow the program, you struggle with the balance between, okay, how can we compensate other people for their time and their work so that they have the space to do it, without making it, some corporate structure. We've looked at other mentorship programs that like charge entry fees or application fees and those sorts of things that we're trying to avoid, to keep it very community focused
and accessible.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think as well, it's really interesting to hear you talk about how everyone's journey is equally as valid, when you're in that community, because a lot of people are just looking to improve their experience when they're doing their hobby and their passion, and they're just trying to feel like they're improving. And I think a really important part of that is the willingness to fail, where I think the moment you start attaching consequences to it, of like, well, then my Kickstarter will fail, or then my game won't sell, or even just, I'm trying to pitch this to a publisher and that if I don't do it perfectly, then I won't get that. Then you start losing the potential to fail. So that means people are more scared to take risks and learn and grow. And it's just a weird sort of foible, I think, of feeling like everything has to be about that, as you said, like the industry, and that it's actually more about community. And I think I was talking to Ross in a previous podcast, and he was saying, like, a rising tide raises all ships, and the better we all do, that we can pull each other up. And I think that's really lovely to foster that kind of community.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, when he said it, I was like, oh, that's just a way better way of phrasing it than I ever could. But that's one of the great things about a community, though, isn't it? Is that there is that ability to learn more stuff from other people, and to enjoy the process and enjoy I don't even like to say failure, almost like enjoying the experience of trying and learning and trying again. And that actually that process in of itself is such a great learning experience for people. And I suppose that's where your mentorships come in, is to sort of give people the guidance through that process.
Yeah, and a point of connection too. Sometimes it can be very isolating, especially if you don't come in with a built-in community or a group of friends who are into this. It's so nice to just have somebody who's in your corner who says, yeah, your ideas are great and I want to see them exist.
That's really cool. I really like that as a philosophy behind what you do. And I really hope that you get more and more people coming, although I don't know how much you'll be able to cope with more people.
Yeah, we haven't found the ceiling yet, but we might soon.
Well, yeah, I mean, it sounds like they're getting into such high demand now, though, that you're going to have to start putting in some sort of limit to how many you can do all at once. But that's no bad thing, considering you do them every 3 months as well. That's incredible compared to a lot of mentoring programs, which tend to be yearly or, twice yearly. To do it every 3 months is a huge amount of investment on your part.
I think it's a good time for all parties involved. It's long enough that you can actually get something done, if you wanted to, prepare your Kickstarter or launch or just make a prototype or whatever, create your portfolio online. It's perfect amount of time, but it's not too long that like no one's overcommitting, right? It's a very manageable amount of time in a year.
Yeah, I really love when people come in with a really small specific goal, like, hey, there's this contest that the entries are due in 2.5 months, and I really just want to get a game together for that. That's always fun to see.
Well, I for me at least, I'm a massive procrastinator, so having a deadline is absolutely invaluable. I imagine it means as well that those sessions become really focused and become quite productive because there is that end goal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. So, bearing in mind of all the things we've just talked about, which is an awful lot, we've covered a lot in such a short amount of time. So thinking back to like your experience when you first started like dipping a toe into the tabletop games community, what would be like the number one piece of advice you would have given yourself or to someone who's going on that journey now?
Gosh, I thought about this question and I thought I had an answer, but it's... Gosh, I don't know. Like, you want to say things that take shortcuts, that are like, oh, don't do this. This is a mistake or whatever, or this is like everybody does this. You kind of want to say something like that to yourself. But I don't know. I'm a big believer in that. Like, your experience defines you, and I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for all of those mistakes that I did make, or the way that I, discovered playtesting groups. Years after I started designing games, where you were just doing it with your friends and family and so excited about it, like if I had entered it early, would I have been more pompous about it with my friends and family? Maybe, like that wouldn't have been a good experience. I don't know. I don't know what I would tell myself necessarily. Maybe just that, like, it will sometimes be hard, but it will get fun again, like, that sort of like that pushing through, like when it is difficult and you hit that wall. Because I'm the kind of person who, if I'm learning a new skill and I become just good enough to do most of it, and it's that like, like strumming a guitar, playing chords, great, I'm good at that. Finger picking, nah, I'm fine. I can get away with strumming, like, so pushing through that next step and be like, no, you can develop this, and it's not that hard, like it just takes some work and practice and dedication.
Yeah, I say this thing all the time to James where it's like, it's not difficult, it's just hard work.
Yep.
Where it's like, it's not a difficult thing to do, it's just hard work to get through it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a sort of contradiction in terms, of course, but I see a lot of things like that is a sticking point for me all the time of like, oh, this isn't a difficult thing for me to get through. It's just going to be hard work, and I don't want to do the hard work.
That's a great way to look at it, yeah.
Absolutely, but I think, to me, that's almost how I define, like, a bulk of writing games, is that, because playtesting it's not difficult to playtest, but it can be quite hard work to playtest. Like, it's quite repetitive, you have to find lots of different people to play your game, sometimes it's quite painful, because people give you, like, painful feedback, and even though they're not saying it as against you, it can feel emotionally quite draining sometimes. All of those things are hard work, but it's not a difficult thing to go out and do playtesting. It's just hard to experience.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I definitely struggle more with the... oh, okay, so this is broken. I can't solve it. Like that idea of like, oh, I'm not good enough to fix this problem, That's usually where I struggle.
But you've had so many good experiences where you've put something on the shelf and then come back to it months or a year later, and now you have the skills or the new perspective that let you clear that hurdle much more easily than you had anticipated.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah, the first game I really started to seriously design was too big, for someone just getting into it. Going back to your other question, I think the advice I would give myself is start small. Design something small. And the big game I tried was good, but it was a slog, and I didn't know enough about how to solve these sort of more complex problems. And Grace is absolutely right. I put it on the shelf and then came back to it years later and was like, why was I stuck on this? This is how you solve that, But it's because I had, designed more games and learned more, obviously, as, being in all these groups and playtest meetings, just absorbing all that knowledge and having some mentors myself who helped guide me along to in that journey.
And I think as well, having those experiences kind of inoculates you almost against the stress of it not working first time. Like, yeah. I suppose, at least when I was first starting out, I used to get really overwhelmed and stressed out if something didn't work, and then that stress would almost be like a block for me to try and find a solution. And I think the more you do it, the more you just get used to that, and it's less stressful as an experience.
Yep, at 100%.
And you're like, oh, this doesn't work. That's fine. I'm not going to try and fix it straight away. I'm going to let that ruminate, and I'm going to just make I don't know if you ever do this, but like a placeholder mechanic. I quite often do that if I'm stuck on a thing. So I'll be like, I don't know how drafting in this game is going to work yet, and whether you get your cards at the start or the end of your turn, and whether you draw up. So let's just say that everyone's got 4 cards and you draw them at the end of the turn for now. I know that's not how it's going to work,
right.
But I'm stuck on that right now. So let's just make that as a placeholder, and then I'll loop back round to it once I've worked on this other problem that I already have ideas on how to fix.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely a great process to go for.
I think, but that's because I don't stress about it anymore, because I've written so many games now that that would be a huge thing that would stop me in my tracks, and that would be the thing that would make me put it back on the shelf and not look at it for a year. Which is great as a process if you are in that place. But now I just wouldn't stress. I'd be like, oh, well, it doesn't really matter if that bit's broken. That's fine. I'll just move on to another bit. And actually, at least for me, that's informed a lot of my life. Like, I've become a much less stressed person now because I've gone through that experience of like doing something and not working and finding out that that's okay. That actually I've kind of almost adopted it reverse back into my life, rather than it being a life skill I brought to games design. Games design's kind of informed my life skills.
Well, that's amazing.
Yeah, congratulations. Yeah. That sounds really good.
Oh, thank you. But I just think that those things, that shows the value of learning that stuff. As you said, like, start small, except that sometimes you have to put things away and come back to them later, and that those things do help, and that can be a really useful process. So, Grace, do you have anything to add, or do you think?
If I was going to go back and tell myself something other than like, this exists and you are going to do it, I think one of the things I've been ruminating on lately with all of my creative projects is coming back to the idea that what makes you different is what makes you interesting and special. And I know that can kind of come off as like a weird kind of exclusionary statement, but basically the idea to just lean into the stuff that you like or find interesting. And again, it may buck trend, or it may, be things that people are like, why would you put your energy on that? Or, but the board games that I like have the weirdest themes and the most colorful art, and, the music that I like is emotional, and, it's about carving out a space where you feel comfortable and happy, as opposed to trying to fit yourself into the mold of what you think you're supposed to be. And so, like, I got really lucky working on Celestial Stories. I was invited to be part of the Dyson Inc. anthology, and I pitched them an idea that was a cooperative storytelling roll and write. And my initial pitch was so self-deprecating. It was like, you may say this isn't a game. I don't know if this will be well received, but it was the idea I had the most feelings for and most excitement for. And the publishers were great and so supportive. And they were like, yes, this is a game, and this is a game we want to make, and we're excited about it. And if anyone tries to tell you it's not a game, we'll fight for it. And they were so supportive of it the whole time, so that when I did start seeing a few negative reviews or things like that, I at least knew that there were people who it was for, right? When you make art of any kind, it's not for all people. And that can be hard to learn.
Yeah. Well, no, that's such a lovely story, though, because you knew that they had your back, but also you're right. There are games for everyone, and it's really easy to fall into the trap of, I need to make something that people will like, so therefore I won't make something that I necessarily like.
Yeah. And it's such a hard lesson too, that just because someone doesn't like something that you made, it doesn't mean they don't like you. That, your art is not the sum of you. So you can put out a board game that your friends like and nobody else likes, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you're a bad designer. It just means that you made something that made people really happy, and those are the people that you should focus on. That was some of the best feedback I got early on doing music, was focus on the people who are receptive to what you're making, because those are the people you're making it for. You're not making it for people you're not trying to convince other people to like it who are already disinclined to like it. You don't have to win them over. There are people in the world who want the things that you make, and you just need to find them, because they're out there and they're excited for you.
Oh, that's lovely. I love that. I kind of learned a similar lesson, but nowhere near as poetic and nowhere near as nice as that, where the same thing in playtesting of like, if someone doesn't like something, you don't have to change your game every time someone just goes, oh, I don't like that thing. That's fine. But to actually extend it beyond you can make whole games that only a few people like and that's fine is actually quite nice. It gives you permission to make the thing that makes you happy. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, I think that goes back to what we were saying earlier, doesn't it?
Yeah, it all kind of ties together.
Oh, look at that. That's really lovely. And it's so nice to hear about the experience that you had with Celestial Stories, about how the publisher was so positive and like so behind you and okay to embrace the idea of a game not necessarily being for everyone, but it being for those few people.
Yeah, it was wonderful, and it fit really nicely with the vision of, because Dice and Ink is an anthology of 10 roll and writes, and so most of them are closer to traditional roll and writes. They're little math puzzles, and so it was so thoughtful for them to include something that is a little more of a filler and is social and is a different experience. And I know it hasn't, people right now are like doing solo gaming experiences and things as a result of the pandemic. So it maybe hasn't gotten a chance to breathe its fullest life yet. But it was really nice to have them in my corner, and they were so wonderful and supportive. I couldn't have picked better people to be involved with.
Do you think that your experience of like making music has inspired that kind of philosophy?
Oh, absolutely. And it was so essential in my confidence level too, because again, it's so hard to put something that you've made out there to be received by anybody. And if I hadn't gone through that with music first, I don't think I would have had the confidence to do that with games. And that's also part of why Mike and I do so much co-designing. Not only do we enjoy creating together, but it gives you a bit of a safety net. If somebody doesn't receive something well, we made it together. The pressure isn't all on me, and this isn't a personal failing in the same way if you've done it collaboratively or as part of a team. Now you can kind of see it more as the project that it is, as opposed to this is me on a plate.
Yeah, no, I can see the philosophy behind that, and I absolutely, when you're doing something collaboratively, you do have that sort of space as well to feel. I don't want to say analytical, that seems almost less emotional, but you have that ability to separate yourself from the thing that you're creating and be able to embrace the best and let go of the bad more than if it's just an individual experience. Or at least that is for me as an individual. I think other people do have the ability to do that individually, but for me at least it was a big deal to be able to work in that kind of collaborative process.
Yeah.
There's some really lovely philosophies that you two work under. And you can see that because you've chosen to do the mentoring program, and clearly having those kind of positive processes behind what you do has influenced you wanting to help others in the first place at all. So that's obviously like a thing that guides you on your journey.
Yeah, and it's easier than I thought it would be to do that. Like the people who want mentors, they're out there. They don't know where to go. You have to build that house for them to go into. Like we didn't create mentors and mentees. We just gave them the tools to meet each other, like same thing with the micro grants, like we wanted to be able to give, to help out underrepresented creators, financially. When we were fundraising, obviously we don't both personally have all the funds to do this. So we did a GoFundMe for it. And people came out in droves and donated so much money. It was unbelievable, the kindness that everyone showed. And you just have to give them the opportunity. You just have to hold out your hand and say, this is what we need, or this is what we have. Do you want it, or can you give it? And you'll find tons of people who would do that.
That's a really positive sort of experience within the community as well, to find that what you wanted to do was along the same lines as what a huge amount of the people in the community want to experience. To put yourself out there in the first place has given you the opportunity to learn that. And if you'd not done that in the first place, you wouldn't have had that opportunity to find that stuff out.
Yeah, precisely. Absolutely. We're talking about like how do you measure success or whatever. Like for us, for this program, part of the measurement of success is will other people do this as well? Like we don't necessarily want to be the only mentorship program, and we know we're not. We modeled off of a couple ones that we found and got validation from that. We're not the only scholarship. We're not the only micro grant. Like there are others out there, but we want to see more of that. It's to show people that it's easy to do and it's possible, and that there's an audience for it. We've already had requests from people who wanted to get their own mentorship programs started in their own sort of localized area, because ours is so like global and all encompassing. It's multidisciplinary. It's not just game designers, it's artists and translators and convention runners and all that kind of stuff. So it's cool to see. It's really cool to see. It's super validating.
Yeah, like you said earlier, it's not that it's hard, it's just that it's hard work.
Yeah.
I say it about so many things now. It's like my mantra. And really, at the end of the day, what's a bit of hard work? At least for me as an individual, I find that, I'm not intimidated by the idea of hard work. I'm just going to confront myself with it,
Yeah.
But it's great to hear that that you're in that situation now. And I really thank you both for coming and talking to me, because it's been really inspiring to hear what you've had to say.
Well, it's been lovely chatting with you and hearing your perspective as well. I think our philosophies meld well together.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of positivity within the game design community as a whole, that a lot of people are trying to embrace that positivity generally. So I think we just need to keep fostering it, because it's such a great environment to be. And it's a nicer place to be when we're all trying to raise one another up, I think.
Absolutely. You just want to connect those dots and keep people creating.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much. And are you still unpacking? Are you still settling in, or are you settled now?
We have unpacked, but all that means is that everything's on the floor in a pile rather than in nice, neat boxes.
And we moved with almost no furniture.
Yeah.
So we got a really cool old man chair for like $10 at a yard sale the other day. So now we both at least have a place to sit, and we're on our way.
Bargain. Well, that was Mike and Grace, and I want to say a huge thank you to them. Such an enjoyable chat. I had such a great time. Some really interesting insights on the philosophy behind them doing what they do, and the reason why they started up the mentorship program, with some added life skill discussion added in. That was great. I also want to say a huge thank you to our Patreons who supported us into being able to make this podcast, and please do make sure you check that out if you would like to also support us in the future. That's needycatgames.com/Patreon or patreon.com/needycatgames. It works both ways. Thanks so much for listening. See you next time.